Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of Soul Over Matter podcast. I am your host, Michelle. I'm a spiritual teacher, Reiki master guide, and host of Soul Over Matter podcasts, as well as author and empowerment coach for women. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my new YouTube channel with the same name, Michelle the Mystic, please go subscribe, like, and comment and share. I have been uploading guest episodes of Soul Over Matter podcasts up on my YouTube channel, as well as meditations and daily collective readings. So go and check that out. And as always, thank you for your support and thank you for your shares on social media and your reviews on Apple. Go review Soul Over Matter podcasts on Apple and you'll receive a complimentary card reading, or listen on Spotify and rate us 5 stars and leave feedback on the episodes. Everything matters, and when we receive more feedback, we're able to reach more like-minded souls like us. So on today's episode, I wanted to get a little raw, a little vulnerable, as there are a lot of planets in retrograde right now, and I have been in deep reflection of my life. The last 5 years have felt like 100 lifetimes, and this week, as I'm actually recording, is the week I moved from New York City to San Francisco. And I was a born and bred New Yorker, and it was the first time I really uprooted my life, and it was the catalyst of my awakening journey of who you see here today. And old videos, old posts will show you how much I've actually grown and how much we're all growing and we're all changing and we're all evolving. So if you have been listening to Soul Over Matter podcasts since then, I started around 2.5 years ago. And one of my first episodes was that spiritual awakening, was that dark night of the soul, was that move from New York City to San Francisco. But I wanted to give a refresher. I wanted to share more deeply and a more updated version of that episode. I have not personally listened to that episode, and my life has drastically changed in the last 2.5 years. So let's go back to August 2018, the summer of 2018. And this is kind of, my awakening story, as well as initial dark nights of the soul. So back in 2018, I was living in New York. I grew up in New York City. I went to high school in Manhattan. I was a light worker, empath, highly sensitive soul, living in spiritual boot camp. New York City is boot camp. It is like one of the boot camp centrals. It's like Matrix Central. There are just so many souls and so many energies and entities that live in New York City that as a highly sensitive soul, it can feel very dense. And sometimes you don't feel that density until you leave. I left 5 years ago, and every time I go back, I have to protect my energy because I have healed so much trauma, so much. I've done so much inner work that I radiate at a higher level, at a higher frequency than New York City itself. It's very dense there. And anyway, so summer of 2018, I moved to San Francisco. At the time, I also left a pension. I left friends, family. I trusted my heart and my soul. And when I really reflect on my life, I've had these pockets and these moments where I continually trusted my soul. Like one time I was 2 years into college, I was away at college, and something was like, no, you're meant to be a speech pathologist, transfer sophomore year, like leave your friends, like leave that journey behind and start a new journey. And I've been a quitter a lot of my life, and that's a negative connotation, but quitters are actually those who trust their heart and trust their soul no matter what others and external energies are sharing to them. They're continually on that path, on that journey of being with themselves. And so summer of 2018, I had backlash. I had people saying, oh, wow, you're moving across the country, you're leaving your pension behind, you've been working in the school systems for 5 years, like, what are you doing? You don't have a ring on your finger. At the time, I was with a partner, and I just trusted. I was like, hey, this is a grand adventure. Let's go. Let's do this thing. So I was naive in that way, right, too, which is actually really beautiful in hindsight. It's like, ignorance can be bliss, right? I was like, wow, this is amazing. I am trusting myself, and it was hard. It was really hard. I started work. So what we did is we packed up all our stuff, we hired movers, and then we just flew out there. And our stuff, we were like sleeping on an air mattress in our apartment, and I started work 2 days later. So old Michelle, like, bless her heart, she's like, yeah, let's just do all the things. I started work as a speech therapist in a school district right away because it was already mid-August, and in California, the school districts begin school early August. So I was already, quote unquote, behind. And I just thought I could do it, right? I was like this very eager soul, like, yeah, I can move across the country and start work immediately, no big deal, with none of our belongings, just a suitcase full of stuff, and sleeping on an air mattress, and like learning the new subway system and all these things. So with that start, now looking back, I'm like, I might have done it a little differently. With that start, I was kind of setting myself up for an overload of stress, honestly, right? I was like immediately thrown into this new environment, this new neighborhood, this new city, this new job, right? Like all these new things, uprooting my entire life. And it was exhausting. And if you are a person who is highly sensitive, at times we burn out because we are constantly giving and constantly pushing over our limit. And at the time I was doing that, and work was stressful. It was a very stressful job. It was one that I was not necessarily used to back in New York City. And it was catching up to me. So I started getting sick, and I was getting colds. I was getting, fever. I was like really run down, and it was only like August, September. So I began really getting sick. My immune system was obviously sending an alarm to me, right? Like, hey, you need to rest, you need to slow down. Like, this was a huge move. And I've always been connected to my intuition all of my life. I've always been psychic. I've always seen things. I've always heard things. I've always had this deep inner knowing, which is claircognizance. But at the time, there was something blocking me, and I was continually getting sick, which was the beginning of this dark night of the soul. And as I was getting sick, I think it was around Halloween at this time. So we had been in San Francisco about 2.5 months, and I loved it, right? It was amazing. It was just such a great, like, I just love California so much. I've always loved California. I had friends in high school who would literally be like, Michelle, I feel like you're from California. So I was getting sick, and there was this Instagram post about like readings, like getting a free reading or like picking a card. I can't really remember what it was, but I won it. And so I asked a question of like, what do I most need to know right now? And the general message was, you are being blocked right now. Like, your guides are trying to contact you. They're trying to help you right now. Like, this is why you're sick. You need a vacation. You need a chakra healing. You need Reiki. Like, she was very honest. Like, you need some healing here. Like, we got to get some energetic surgery because you are overwhelming your system. And I remember reading that email and going to bed, and my third eye was burning. It was throbbing so hard, and tears are streaming down my face. I'm laying next to my ex-partner, and I'm just like, what is going on with me? Like, honestly, what is happening to me? I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm exhausted. Like, please, like, show me something. I received that confirmation that something was wrong. And I remember reading the bottom of the email about Reiki, and I had heard of Reiki. There was a person I went to college with who would do like Reiki sessions in our like common area. And there was something that drew me to it, but I wasn't yet ready at the age of like 18, 19, right? So this is to say, in your life, notice what you've been drawn to, even as a young child or a teenager or like in your younger years, that's starting to come back around, right? Because 9 times out of 10, I'd even say 10 times out of 10, if you're drawn to a healing modality, if you're drawn to a place, it means that you've lived lifetimes there, or it means that you've lived lifetimes doing that work. So follow follow that intuition, follow that compass of your soul. So it's late at night and I'm exhausted and I'm tired and I'm just like, I need something. So I actually pull up my phone. I go to yelp.com and I type in San Francisco Reiki healers. And I find my now Reiki teacher, Tanya, who I've had on the podcast. So go back to look at an episode in season 1, I think, with Tanya Corona. So I find her page, right? I don't know who she is, but I'm drawn to her. And I remember laying in bed and hovering over the book appointment, like hovering over this moment that I knew would change my life as I knew it. Honestly, like my soul knew like this was the wake-up call. And as I'm hovering over this link, this button, I feel 3 taps on my feet. Whew, I have chills as I say this. I feel 3 taps on my feet. It's probably about 1 a.m. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I knew it was my higher self. I knew it was my guides saying it is time to wake up. We got to wake up before the world wakes up. We got to wake up before the pandemic. Like, now we know, right? The pandemic 2020. Like, this was summer of 2018. Like, my soul was like, we got to do this before 2020 comes around. So I feel those taps, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, there's no way. And then I'm still hovering over that book appointment and I feel another 3 taps. So when you are called, when your soul is calling, the knock will continue. It'll be like this nice, soft, gentle knock. And then it just gets louder and louder. And it becomes a bang if you do not listen, if you don't heed the call. And this will happen many times in our lives. And I will share about the next big moment that happened for me. So I eventually booked the appointment, right? And I trust. And I remember it was the day after Halloween. So I'm at work and I remember taking an Uber to her place, right? To receive that Reiki. And I was thinking in the Uber, like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen here, right? So even though my soul has always known and trusted in magic and spirituality, my ego was still fighting. It was still like, what's going to happen? Like, this is scary. We've never done something like this. Like, what is she going to say to us? Like, what's going to come up? So when we make decisions, they don't always feel great. And I can't stress that enough, because sometimes we are making decisions. That are life-changing, right? That will bring us on a new trajectory of our lives. And they don't feel good in the moment, but our soul knows that they are the most aligned path for us. And I can't stress that enough, honestly, because there's so many of us who are on this journey who are continuously making these decisions that don't make sense to our human, but our soul, our higher self is like, we made these contracts way before we incarnated. So as I'm in this Uber going to my first Reiki healing, right? And I'm now a Reiki master teacher, by the way. So trust those niggles. It was the Mexican holiday Dia de las Muertas, and right, the Day of the Dead. And it's not a coincidence for me, honestly. And I'm actually recording this on the day guided by death. So much death and rebirth happening, and also just on this journey called life when you are an ever evolving human. We have to be okay with change. We have to be okay with death and transformation. So I remember seeing all of the sugar skulls and the beautiful decorations. Like there's this this neighborhood in San Francisco called Castro, and they just do a magnificent like 3-day festival. So I'm like driving through this, going to my first Reiki session, and I remember entering the room and immediately crying. Her room felt like home. It felt like acceptance, and it felt like, if you are in the San Francisco area, highly recommend contacting Tanya Corona for a Reiki session. Like, it was heaven. It was like I could lay all my shadows and my traumas and just feel that non-judgment. And there were so many beautiful crystals and paintings, and it's like sending love to that version of me in 2018. And I remember I recorded the entire post session, like where she shared all of the things that came up from my past lives, from this lifetime. And I knew in that moment, during that reflection, that I would become a Reiki teacher. I just knew. I was like, my soul was thirsty for knowledge, and not just knowledge, but remembering. So a Reiki session can help you unlock all your gifts, all the knowledge that you have had for lifetimes, because it clears the blockages in our chakras. And I have a chakra episode as well too. You can go check out the 7 chakras. And each of our chakras holds different energies. It holds different parts of our soul. So my heart was completely blocked. My throat chakra was completely blocked. My root chakra, all of these parts of my body, right, were so blocked off because I grew up in New York City. My soul knew we can't be our shiny, bright selves in New York City. It's very loud and very distracting, and also very scary to be so open energetically and be this open channel in a place where there are millions of people. So that began, oh gosh, I remember crying too on the Uber ride home, and just knowing in my heart and in my soul, like this is a new chapter in my life. And I began meditating every day. I was actually meditating every day before then. And I was immediately like drawn to colors too when I moved to San Francisco. Like I joined the library, and I remember buying all these like books about color therapy. So like Reiki and all these things were already calling me. So after that, yeah, I began meditating like twice a day. I was like really into Dr. Joe Dispenza. I was just really dedicated. I was journaling every day. I still have like those old journals, and to read those journals now, it's like another lifetime. It really is another lifetime. When you are dedicated to this path, we have multiple lifetimes in this one lifetime. And so this was November 1st was my first ever Reiki session. And 10 days later, November 11th, 11/11, which is a big portal each and every year. A lot of light workers wake up around that time every year. So I'm excited for this next wave of light workers to awaken in this year. 11/11, I remember waking up, and it was the first time I like intentionally channeled. I was sitting in meditation, and I heard the power within you. And I was like, the power within you. And at the time, I only had a personal Instagram account, right? I was not doing any business or sharing any spirituality. I mean, I've been meditating on and off since my early 20s. I've been doing yoga since high school, right? But like, I never talked about these things. I never shared these things. I was very much in the spiritual closet, as we like to call it. So something was like, begin an Instagram. So I looked up Power Within You as an Instagram handle. It was already taken. And then it gave me the suggestion of You, the Power Within. So send me a DM if you're listening to this and you remember Michelle the Mystic as You, the Power Within. So I started out You, the Power Within that day, 11/11, that morning. I started out this new Instagram. And I think my first post was about nature. It was about connecting with nature, and it really became my journal. I didn't set out to become a business or to become a healer on there. I really just began sharing my heart, sharing my soul, right? Which is part of healing our throat chakra. It's communicating and expressing our soul. So that was 11/11, right? And actually that evening is when my ex-fiance proposed to me. So in retrospect, it is absolutely wild. And I know I've shared this before in some episodes, but it's absolutely wild, but also not wild, because I believe everything is connected and everything supports everything. In the morning, right, me creating that Instagram, me creating more of me, was my Aries North Node. We actually just moved into these nodes. My Aries North Node was my purpose, right? My what I'm reaching for, my destiny. And that evening, my ex-fiance proposing to me was my Libra South Node, was old karma, was past lives, right? Was doing more of what I've already done, right? And like Libra is, I don't want to say codependency, because it wasn't really codependency, but it was just like familiarity. And what happened, right, was like this nodal shift, right? Like my soul was reaching for our destiny, but my human was keeping us in this comfort zone, right? I remember leaving San Francisco and desiring to be engaged and desiring to have a ring on my finger and like all these things. And in retrospect, right, like that version of me wanted that. Like, honestly, I wanted those things at that time, but I didn't realize how much I was going to change and transform after that Reiki session, after moving to San Francisco, right? So all these things in retrospect are like, holy shit moments. And I just started sharing, right? I started sharing on that Instagram. I started, really building a spiritual practice. I remember buying, my sister at the time was like, what do you want for Christmas? And I was so cute and sweet back then. I was like, I want like books about Reiki and books about tarot. And I was actually afraid of tarot initially, right? Talk about past life trauma. So she like bought me and I still have, she bought me a rose quartz crystal sphere. I still have that. So I was just on this trajectory of awakening, and also bridging my worlds, right? Because my partner at the time wasn't spiritual. He wasn't into any of that stuff. He was supportive, but we weren't aligned anymore in that way. I just didn't see it yet. And I remember we went to Cancun for New Year's that year. And I was in the hotel. We were in the hotel. I think he was already asleep. It was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day right at that point. And I was listening to a podcast and I was writing my intentions. And I think I still have this journal. I wrote down that I desire to have a women's group. I desire to be a spiritual teacher. I desire to be a light worker and to teach and to grow and to share and to continue learning. And I had written all these beautiful intentions down. not knowing that a lot of them, most of them, would come true only a couple months later. Talk about your soul knowing when it's time to wake up. So that night I was writing these intentions for this new year, and that month, right, January, I got my first certification in Reiki level 1, which is all about self. If you guys are interested in that, send me a DM on Instagram at Michelle the Mystic, or drop a comment here if you're watching on YouTube and let me know, because I teach Reiki now. So I learned Reiki level 1, and then I began doing dream journaling, and I woke up in the middle of the night one day and literally wrote down the outline of a women's circle. I had never guided a women's circle. I didn't have any quote unquote certifications to be a women's circle facilitator. I think I had gone to 1 or 2 in New York City, like back in 2014, but I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. So I remember waking up the next morning, looking at this journal entry, being like, what the heck? Like, who wrote this, right? So this is called channeled writing. When you're writing and you're not really fully aware of what's coming through the paper, you are just allowing your soul or your higher self to take the wheel. And I read over this guide and I was like, oh, this is me. I have to do this. And I sat in my living room and I said, I am going to hold a women's circle on April 4th at the library. And so talk about manifesting, right? Using that throat chakra, talking aloud your manifestations. And I'm recording this on the new moon in Leo. So I then got Reiki level 2 certified a couple months later, and that's when you can begin practicing on others. I also do Reiki level 2 certification. So I was, on this trajectory of really, really focusing on myself. Like, I was meditating for an hour in the morning, an hour at night. I was going to yoga every day. I also was in a really stressful job. So talk about holding that balance of living in the 3D world, right? What I like to call the muggle world, and also evolving as a soul and starting to channel into that 4D and 5D dimension, right? If you haven't seen the meme of Big Bird at the conference table, right, with all like the business people, like that's what it feels like to be a light worker in this world sometimes. You're just this like bright light and you know so much and you're just like, what is even real? So looking back at that, it's like, wow, the spring of 2019, being in these meetings with parents and with others and, flipping that victim mindset, right? Because I used to be that victim. I would not be empowered. I would not speak up for myself. I would people please, or I would just not say anything. Like, honestly, I would just fawn, right? Which is it's a trauma response. It's just like lay back and like freeze or fawn. And I wouldn't share my truth. So what I began doing with my Reiki is, I was in a lot of stressful meetings at times, and there was a lot of tension. And if you are energetically sensitive, you pick up on everyone else's stuff. So I would go into these rooms in the morning before these stressful meetings, and I would put Reiki symbols in the corners, and I would do my meditation, and I would just share that light with the room and pray like everyone is working as a team and everyone is at peace and we're all cooperative. And 9 times out of 10, when I did this, when I was proactive, the meetings would go smoothly and everyone would be in harmony. And I noticed like, wow, like I am making a difference. So I stress this to my clients all the time, is like, we have grown up, so many of us have grown up as that victim, right? Like avoiding certain places because the energy is too much and too intense, not realizing how powerful we are, and that when we are proactive and we walk into a room, we get to influence the room rather than the room influencing us. So becoming an empowered empath, and I have episodes on that as well. So I began really stepping into my power in the spring of 2019, like in all areas of my life, like healing my chakras, healing my trauma, inner child trauma, right? Past life trauma, like so much ancestral trauma, womb work, like, oh my gosh, like some people really ask me, Michelle, what did you do? Or like, what plant medicines did you do? I'm like, I didn't do any of that stuff. I was like raw. I was like just raw. It was raw healing. I had a few teachers, but a lot of it was just so intuitive. So like doing the women's circle, right? So it was April 4th. I didn't even know about the astrological wheel really at that point. I was like, in retrospect, I realized, oh, new moon in Aries. Aries is the first house of the wheel. Like it's the astrological new year. I didn't realize my first women's circle was actually the new moon in Aries, which is the first moon of the new year, which was really cool. So I remember calling up libraries and asking about like the free spaces. And there was one, it was about like a 20-minute walk from my house. And I remember going the week before and just checking out the room, right? Like just checking out, okay, almost like, so this is called like future envisioning, right? So I was walking around this room and being like, okay, I'm holding space here. I'm going to call in these women and I am going to hold this new moon ceremony. We're going to set intentions. I'm going to guide a meditation. We're going to have crystals. It's going to be beautiful. So again, not knowing, quote unquote, what I was doing, but intuitively, my soul knew. My soul knew exactly what she was doing. And I didn't really have a lot of friends yet in San Francisco. Like I had met a few friends through my job. I had met a few friends in the neighborhood. So what I did was I literally, I posted on Instagram. I think I made a meetup. Remember meetups? I made a meetup. And I also just texted all the women I did know in San Francisco, regardless of whether they were spiritual or not. I had that moment of, it's not up to me to figure out if this is meant for someone or not. Like, let them make that decision. And I was pleasantly surprised. Some people, like neighbors showed up, like people I wouldn't expect showed up to check it out, this women's circle. And that night I had 12 women show up. So with me included, that was 13 women. 13 women showed up, and 13 is the goddess number. 13 that's how many moons we have a year. So it was just a very powerful night. And I remember when I walked into that room, I had brought oracle cards. There was like this fake orchid in the corner. I brought that in the middle. Like I was just winging it. I was just trusting and allowing it to flow. And it was a catalyzing moment of my journey and my career, holding space for others, especially women. So that started a monthly in-person women's circle. This was 2019 at the time. And then I began sharing these at a loft space. One of my dear friends had a loft space through her job, and I started holding space there. So then summer 2019, I started holding them virtually, which was kind of wild, right? Because it was like me knowing like I'm going to start holding these virtual circles, right? Because it was the summer before 2020. So I was on a solo trip, a solo journey to, where was I? Oh, so I went to Paris, I went to Amsterdam, and I went to London. And in Paris, in my Airbnb, I hosted a virtual women's circle. So then I started hosting them virtually because I had a lot of clients and I had a lot of friends back home in New York that obviously couldn't make my live San Francisco circle. So then I started doing one live in person and then one virtual. And also that summer was, that was like, that was a peek into my solo journey, because first my ex and I went to Maui, and Maui just felt like home. It felt so powerful. It was the first time I spoke aloud to the land in my life. Like I just did this like solo hike and I just sat and talked to the land, and it was absolutely powerful. Really the first time that I began creating and realizing this deep connection with Mother Nature. We are nature, and we have forgotten as a society that we are just like the trees and the plants and the animals. So that moment was such a vivid, active, awakening moment for me to like stand there. I was at Black Sand Beach in Maui and just spoke out to the ocean and to the trees and to the land, and there were deep activations there. So that summer was, God, this really incredible catalyst. And then I come home from Maui and then from my solo journey in Europe, and then meeting a soul sister in Amsterdam, and we just so happened to be there for the Pride Parade on the canal. Like, you can't make these stories up. And it was, looking back in retrospect, right, that's now 4 years ago. It's like, holy crap, I was already priming, right? That's a big word in spirituality and just life in general. Like, we are primed for big life events sometimes. When you really look back at your life, you're like, wow, I was preparing for something, but you don't realize it until after the fact. So that solo journey was, that solo trip to Europe was actually supposed to be with a girlfriend, and she had to back out. And my partner at the time, his mom, everyone was like, hey, I could like buy a ticket with you. And I just knew in my soul that I was meant to spend at least a week on my own. And it was profound. I went to Glastonbury, which is the heart chakra of Mother Earth, and I had just gone to Maui, which is the other heart chakra of the earth, and it was amazing. So always trusting those niggles, trusting your nudges, trusting your soul even when the external world is telling you otherwise. So I get back from these trips, and then I become attuned to Reiki mastery level. So I am now able to teach others the profound healing modality of Reiki. And it was such a powerful summer when I really reflect on it. And I'm noticing that summer for me is very profound. There's a lot of healing that happens. July and August are really big months for me. And I just, looking back, I'm like, wow, the trajectory of our lives, right? I'm recording this under a new moon in Leo, and it's like we are continuously being asked to confront where we are in our life and what we desire for our life, and remembering that these desires are holy, that these desires and these visions are ours, and we have them for a reason. That everything in your life, every moment, every dream of something that is on your soul is actually meant to manifest. And it's your higher self's calling. It's your soul calling. It's your soul knocking. So many of us are trailblazers. So many of us are light workers. So many of us are the generational breakers of our ancestry, right? We are literally here to create new for our lineages, for our legacies, for the world. And our medicine is meant to be shared, and it comes in waves, right? It comes in chapters. Not everything can happen simultaneously. It would be so overwhelming for our human self to do all the things that our soul wants us and desires us to do in this entire lifetime, remembering it's a marathon, not a sprint. So these visions of our lives, right, they continuously knock at our door. They continuously call us forward. And it really depends on how brave we are. It depends on how courageous we are to step out of the comfort zone and to step into our truth and share our truth. God, when I created that Instagram in November of 2018, I was petrified. I would get friends and family messaging me, DMing me, "Hey, Michelle, is this you?" Because I did not share my face on it for 6 whole months. So also, if you are just starting out and sharing your truth or sharing your business even, I wasn't even thinking of a business at that time. I was just sharing from my heart and my soul. And I would just clam up when friends and family would be like, "Hey, is this Instagram yours? Like, I'm reading all these like beautiful journal entries." And I was just so petrified. And that's called the persecution wound, the witch wound. I have an episode on that. I'll actually leave some of these episodes in the YouTube show notes, as well as the podcast show notes. So that's a persecution wound, right? The being persecuted for sharing our gifts with the world. And that comes from past lives. So I was so scared when friends and family would reach out and ask if that You the Power Within account, which is now Michelle the Mystic, was me. And then something in me around March, which is when I was manifesting that moon circle, creating that, envisioning that moon circle, that's when I first showed my face to the world. And I actually should share that post on my Instagram, just to say, like, this is how far we come, right? We are only in competition with ourselves. No one else is you, and no one else has the soul path that you do. And it's hard to remember that in a world that is continually attempting to belittle us and to diminish our light and to minimize our individuality, right? We are taught to be in competition. We are taught to compare. The thief, right? Comparison is a thief of joy. So remember, you are only in competition with the you of yesterday. And I just shared that with someone I met over this past weekend. It's like we are only in competition with ourselves. It's only us. It's only our path. And trusting in divine timing, right? Nothing can happen. Our human can't create, like, the quantum energy is too much sometimes for our human. Like, we want all these things to manifest, but like, it takes a lifetime sometimes, right? I just saw a post of like this 90-something-year-old man climbing this like intense hike in California. Like, it's never too late, and we have our whole lives to create the visions that we see sometimes in our 20s, in our 30s, even as children. So what happened? So after that, I really went through more awakenings, more dark nights of the soul. I remember taking like 2-3 hour baths at times, just like releasing lifetimes of karma, releasing lifetimes of trauma. I even once was in a meditation and I heard Kuan Yin. And I haven't made an episode about Kuan Yin, but I get to. I just heard this voice saying, "I'm Kuan Yin, I'm here to help you." And if you don't know, Kuan Yin is a female ascended master, and she is the goddess, like she is the ascended master of forgiveness. And she came in and helped me heal a lifetime where I was a witch, right? And I was being burned at the stake. And she came in to help me heal my throat chakra in that moment. And I didn't even know who she was at the time, right? So these things happen, right? Where in retrospect, right, in reflection, we're like, wow, now this all makes sense. But in the moment, it's just trusting that we are being led by our soul. And that takes practice, right? I remember the first time I channeled my soul, it was like mind-blowing. It was just like, wow, I have all the answers within me. Right? We all have these answers within us, within our DNA, these codes that are slowly unlocking, right? And being activated in this lifetime. So throughout that year, it was my second year at the school. And I even remember that just feeling depressed the first day, feeling very sad the first day back at school, because I knew that something was shifting. So I actually was beginning to feel the earth was changing. And this is the fall before March 2020, right? So I was feeling like something is going to happen in this world. Like I felt the world ending, and I would be sitting in my office in San Francisco working with students and looking out the window like, why am I in this box? I have to do things. I have like work to do. Like I need to turn on my light warrior, and like, I don't know what it is, but I just felt this sense of urgency. And a lot of us feel that in this lifetime, this sense of urgency to help and to heal and to like get out into the world. And it comes with time and it comes in chapters, right? But I didn't realize at the time I was feeling this sense of urgency because the world was ending. The world as we knew it was about to shift. And I'm at this job, and I was also feeling like I wasn't being appreciated, honestly. So I spoke up for myself, and I asked to be transferred, which was a huge people-pleasing healing moment for me. No one does this, right? I even had my supervisor say, like, in a meeting, she's like, I'm honoring you for your truth, but like no one really asks to be transferred in the middle of a school year. And I stood up for myself. I shared my truth, and I expressed my concerns, and I expressed my needs. And it felt so humbling, and it felt so liberating to do something that others couldn't do, right? That others wouldn't do. I had coworkers at the time that would like, could never do that. And the day I did it, I received so many signs. I was near after speaking to my manager, my supervisor, her office was right by the Pacific Ocean. So I was walking to the bus stop, and then something said, "Turn around, Michelle. Like, be late to work," the rebel that I am, "be late to work and go." Like the ocean, Mama Ocean, Mother Earth was calling me. So I walked back like half a mile to the ocean, took off my shoes, stood in the ocean. I think the moon was a crescent moon, and felt the cold water rushing over my feet. And there were ravens, there were crows just cawing. And I found all these sand dollars, which means like rebirth, transformation. I was receiving all these like angel numbers from the stores on the walk there. Like it was just so many confirming messages. Like, again, you are not here to follow the path. Like, you are not here to follow the herd. You are here to be a rebel. You are here to stand up for yourself and to do things that external forces would say, do the other. Like, if it's like, "Oh, Michelle, go do this," I'm going to do the exact opposite. But not even that. I'm just going to trust in my inner knowing and to stand up for myself. And that takes practice. So that moment was so profound for me. That was like a huge healing of my throat chakra to really, and then go back to work, right, in this environment where everyone kind of knew like, "Oh, Michelle's trying to leave. Michelle's trying to leave this environment and do something better for herself." So it didn't happen right away. It actually happened right around March 2020. It was like a week before the pandemic hit, and I was transferred. So again, honoring the timing of these decisions, right? I then was, I don't want to say forced, I then was sitting in this job while they've tried to find a replacement for 4 or 5 months with my boss knowing like I intentionally was trying to leave, right? So that's like really staying aligned with your path and staying aligned with your decisions and sticking to them in a way that is so fierce and so warrior-like. And like it's like Joan of Arc energy. If you haven't tapped into Joan of Arc energy yet, like that's how I felt at that time. And I actually called on Joan of Arc during that time to help me have support, because my coworkers would be like, "Oh, why are you leaving?" or like, "What's happening?" And I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to be respectful as well. So yes, so I then, a week before the pandemic really hit, I was transferred, and I manifested a job within walking distance of my apartment, which was amazing. Like I was just like, this is beautiful. Like it took a while, but I'm here now. And it was only 1 week, right? Because then all the schools shut down for 3 weeks. But it was just like, hey, you can do this. And like just trusting in that inner knowing, trusting that I was being led. It was more of for my soul's experience and my soul's growth to do that. So Then, yeah, the pandemic hits, and I even remember a week before, I had gathered a few of my girlfriends, and I was like, guys, we got to go to Santa Cruz. Like, we got to go on a girls' trip, and Santa Cruz is about like an hour and a half from San Francisco. And Not Go in Medicine for the People was playing in Santa Cruz, and for some reason, right, I intuitively knew, let's go and like watch live music. And it was the last show before the pandemic. Like, I remember people starting to wear masks at this show. And even one of my friends, her partner at the time was like freaking out, like, don't go to this. Like, this pandemic's coming out. It's been big in other countries, da da da. And I was like, I'm going, like, let's do this. So that was also like a huge marker of like, holy crap. Thank goddess we did that, right? To like go, and it was a full moon, and I just love Santa Cruz. There's something really magical about that place for my soul. So that was really fun, because then the world shut down as we know it, right? And I was truly, the fall 2019, I was truly beginning to feel the shifts of my partnership at the time. Like, I was truly beginning to feel, and it was around the new moon in Libra, which again is my south node, right? Like, oh, this contract is over. And I read journal entries from that time, and I'm sharing this so vulnerably because our souls always know. I read these journal entries now, and I'm like, wow, I still waited another 2 years to follow that nudge that I have to choose myself. And again, forgiveness for waiting that long, right? That long, quote unquote, because my life now wouldn't be my life now if I didn't wait that long, and I'll get to that as well. So I began starting to have these feelings like, oh, maybe this doesn't serve me anymore or serve us anymore. And I remember sharing that with my girlfriends vulnerably on that Santa Cruz trip. Like, guys, I think my partnership is over. And then COVID hit, right? The pandemic hits, and I'm just like, I stay, right? And we stay sometimes. And there was no abuse. Like, there was nothing inherently wrong. It was just our frequencies weren't matching anymore. We had outgrown each other in different ways. And I just was still trying to be like, no, it's going to work. It was like fitting a puzzle piece into the wrong puzzle. And yeah, that summer, things hit the fan, and I stayed in San Francisco, and then my ex at the time went back home to the East Coast. And I remember taking a solo trip to Mount Shasta. And if you don't know Mount Shasta, it's a beautiful portal in Northern California. It's about 4 hours north of San Francisco. And Mount Shasta actually channeled through me. After the day after my first Reiki session, I kept hearing Shasta, Shasta, Shasta in my ears. And I was like, what is Shasta? So I Googled it, and she's a mountain, right? She is actually the root chakra of Mother Earth. So I was like, no wonder I'm getting this call to this mountain. And I finally get to her. What is that? A year and a half after, almost 2 years after that initial calling. So that week again alone was so powerful for my soul to be in this place of healing, of magic, of like galactic energy. I didn't sleep the whole week. It was so profound, and it helped me heal certain aspects of my life. So again, another solo journey to uncover more of me. And then I get back from this trip, and my partner gets back at the time, and we're just like, let's move to Denver, right? Let's move. Moving will solve all of our problems. Raise your hand if you've been there, right? It's like the human journey sometimes. It's just like our souls, I think, just like slap their heads like, what is he or she doing, right? Our guides are just like, all right, she's prolonging this. So we moved to Denver. And again, I know, like, this is not meant to be, but I continue. And so then my contract is up. Well, my 2-year contract with my speech job in San Francisco is up, and we move. And I'm like focusing more on my business at this time. And I don't go back, right? I start actually looking for a online job, a remote job. Because of the pandemic, I didn't feel comfortable going into schools anymore, wearing a mask. I'm a speech pathologist. You can't wear masks and work with children. It just doesn't work. So I actually started looking for remote jobs, and I really began working more on my business. At the time, I had just been doing Reiki healing sessions in person, online. I was also holding those women's circles, and I was starting to create courses. So I was creating chakra courses, signs, intuition courses, and it just became more real. Like my business started really picking up and becoming more real for me as I was still working part-time in speech, remote, which felt so much more liberating as well, right? I wasn't in this brick and mortar building anymore. I was able to work on my computer, and then also began looking towards community in Denver. I was doing some volunteer work in Denver and realizing I was putting a lot of my energy into other places than my partnership at the time. And I want this to be a part 2 here. So I'm going to make this to be continued, to share the last 2 years of my journey. And if you guys resonate with this episode, please feel free to share it in your stories. Send me a DM at Michelle the Mystic on Instagram, or if you're watching this on YouTube, share a comment below, subscribe to my channel. I'm really looking forward to growing this YouTube and to sharing more of my podcast episodes as well as guest episodes on YouTube. So please go subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a beautiful day.